Hello, it's Dawn, and this is my podcast, Dawnversations. It's a variety show about real life stuff, and there's something on here for everybody. So if that sounds good to you, let's go. Welcome to another episode of Dawnversations. Today we have Grace. Hi, Grace.
Hello.
Thank you so much for taking the time and being on my show. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
You bet. So today's topic is a little sensitive and not talked about a lot. So I really feel like it needs to be out there. But Grace, you wrote a book. Tell the audience why you wrote a book.
I experienced pregnancy after loss, and I went through some traumatic issues with losing my pregnancy, during my subsequent pregnancy, and then when my son was born, when he was only a few weeks old. And I actually wrote the book as a way of dealing with everything. Never expected it to be turned into a book, but poof, it happened. And as you mentioned, I want to talk about this subject because it does need a lot more attention.
Right. Okay. So go back and tell me about your pregnancy with your daughter.
So I was pregnant with my daughter, and we found out that there were genetic issues, and she was not viable.
How far in your pregnancy were you?
13 weeks.
Okay, so it was pretty new.
Yes.
How did they end up doing that testing? Was it through the blood work that they figured it out?
It was a series of things. We had gotten an early ultrasound, and one thing led to another, and there were some issues on the ultrasound. They wanted further testing. So I had to go to a specialist, and I had to get special testing done where they took a sample of the placenta.
Why? Okay, I'm trying to grasp this because 13 weeks is so early. It seems to me is so early. So what was it that gave them a red flag from the get-go?
There's a spot on the baby's neck that is called the nuchal fold. And depending on the thickness, that can be an indicator of other issues.
Okay.
So my daughter's nuchal fold was indicative of other issues.
Okay. And had you had any issues prior to getting pregnant with her? Like, did you have any abnormal periods or anything out of the norm?
Well, my whole life is pretty abnormal, but no, and no, nothing that would have led me to believe that I would have an issue like that.
Okay, so you went and got all of this extra testing done. And
Mhm.
when was it that you guys kind of figured out that you weren't going to be able to continue on with your pregnancy?
It was the day after we had the testing.
Oh my.
Yeah,
Okay.
they ran a full genetic DNA profile, which is why they needed the sample of the placenta.
Okay.
So they had all her chromosomal information, and it was discovered that she had what's called trisomy 18. So the 18th chromosome had 3 instead of 2.
And what would that have done?
So trisomy 18 is often nicknamed incompatible with life.
Oh my.
Its fatality rate is extremely high. Very few trisomy 18 pregnancies make it to birth, and those that do make it to birth, most only last about 30 days after birth.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no bright light with any of that. I guess I'm
Nope.
just thinking to find out early on would be somewhat of a blessing as opposed to going through your whole pregnancy.
Yes.
But it's still tragic.
We were given the choice
Oh,
of
really?
continuing the pregnancy and letting nature run its course, or ending the pregnancy. And it it was horrific, but we knew we didn't want anyone to suffer.
Is it like a doctor's visit or is it like a hospital visit when you have to go in? And I have never had to I've never had a miscarriage. I've never had to terminate a pregnancy. I just don't know what happens. So what happens when you
Um,
get that?
well, fortunately, unfortunately, there is insurance. And unfortunately, my insurance denied me coverage.
Okay.
even though it was medically necessary. They denied me any and all financial coverage to the procedure.
Oh my
So
gosh,
I
I don't
had,
even understand that. Like, why do we even have insurance?
yeah, and because it went against their Christian beliefs.
Oh,
And I was
okay.
I was like, "Wait, what?"
Right.
So
Yeah,
I had to
that's
seek
crazy.
alternative routes and use clinics to
Okay.
unfortunately end the pregnancy.
Tell me what a rainbow baby is.
So rainbow baby is the baby that comes after a loss. So my daughter was my loss, and was my rainbow baby, and I unknowingly, I very quickly got pregnant with him. I was pregnant 3 months later. Whoops.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and I discovered for the very first time in my life pregnancy anxiety.
Oh, I can't even imagine just the you're still grieving
Yep.
your baby girl
Hmm.
and then trying to be happy about the baby boy, but then probably in the back of your mind worrying that something could go wrong with him.
Constant. It was constant fear, constant worry. I couldn't sit still in my brain, in my body, none of that. I couldn't relax at all.
Oh,
And the medical staff was just very aloof. And they had no idea that I was pregnant with a rainbow baby and what had happened, how I had lost my daughter, how soon of the turnover it was. So I was dealing with nurses that were like these peppy cheerleaders, and I'm trying not to have a panic attack.
right, right.
So that was another, reason I had written my book, was to kind of get the message out to medical staff, doctors, nurses, x-ray technicians, even the person drawing your blood, that when you're dealing with a rainbow pregnancy, this can be very, very tricky. And it doesn't follow the, quote unquote, traditional parameters of pregnancy.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, did you find many resources or books or groups out there when you were going through it so that you could like to help walk you through it? Like, was there many resources out there?
Yes and no. I had found a group on Facebook um, that dealt with ending pregnancies, and the name of the group was Ending a Wanted Pregnancy. And it was all women who've had to end pregnancies for medical reasons, very much like I did. For me, it was just a little too sad because it was just um, constant stories about ending and loss. And when I became pregnant with my son, I was like, I couldn't continue on that site. So I was then redirected to a group called PALS, which is Pregnancy After Loss Support. And they also have one called Parenting After Loss Support. And the PALS group was very, very helpful for me because these were all women who have lost babies, whether it be stillbirth or miscarriage or what's called TFMR, termination for medical reasons. They've all lost babies and they're all pregnant again at some point, and they all understand the fear, the anxiety, the concern, everything. So it was a very good group to have.
Yeah. Well, and you want to do yourself and your new baby a service by trying to be in good health mentally and physically for
Yes.
their arrival, but I'm sure it was really difficult after experiencing loss
Yep.
to not have all of that anxiety. Did you meditate? Did you go to a therapist? Like, how did you keep yourself in a calm state?
I did exercise up until about 7 months pregnant. So that was very helpful. I did a lot of walking and just keeping busy, but my mind just never relaxed. No matter what I tried to do.
Yeah,
It was funny because quiet time was actually very difficult for me because that's when all the thoughts would come flooding back to me.
right.
So I tried to avoid the quiet time and just keep busy.
Yeah, and what about your husband? How was he through all of this? Did he have a hard time with the loss as well?
He did. He did have a very hard time with the loss. And matter of fact, when I wrote and published my book, he said, he's like, I'm so proud of you. And he bought copies of it, paid full price for them, had me sign them. And he said, I'm not going to read it though. And I said, okay. And he said, it's too hard for me. So he's a wonderful support and he's very proud of me, but it is difficult for him to talk about it. Remembering the anniversaries of things, it's very difficult.
Right.
But to answer the other question you had asked, what books were there available to me? That is a bit tricky because there are books about miscarriage loss and there are books about stillbirth loss. There are none about termination for medical reasons except mine.
Really?
Yes, I'm pretty sure, not 100%, but I'm about 98% sure mine is the first one that deals with pregnancy loss due to termination for medical reasons.
Very interesting. So
And
you
it's such a
said
huge.
yours was more like a journal. So did it read like a journal or did you have to like tweak the words to make it read like a book, like a regular?
I wrote it just like having a conversation with someone.
Okay.
I put in the dates and times and things like that, but it doesn't go like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's all chaptered. Um, and what I would do is I would find like a section of something I wanted to discuss, and I would just word vomit, so to speak. I would just talk and talk and talk and talk about that, and then it's like, oh, that brings me to this point.
Right. Well,
So
and
it's
like you
literally just like a free range journal, just write.
yeah. And like you said, when there's quiet time, that's what you do. You go into the kitchen in your mind and just the thoughts just flow and flow,
Mhm.
sometimes to your detriment, but yeah, you just can't stop thinking. So putting pen to paper sometimes I'm sure was very therapeutic for you.
Very, very therapeutic. I would actually I wrote my book while I would nurse my son. So I wrote it on the notepad section of my phone. So I would hold my son and nurse him, and I would use my finger and tap the words into the phone to just get it out onto,
Right.
pen and paper, but finger and phone.
Right, right. So how is he? Was he born healthy and
He was born healthy. He did have a serious illness. We did almost lose him at 6 weeks old.
oh my.
And thankfully, he recovered. I don't want to say too much because I want to encourage people to read the book.
Sure, sure. That's still frightening though.
It is, and that was part of me thinking about, am I an extraordinary person, or am I a regular person? And the answer is yes, I'm both. I am an ordinary person who does extraordinary things, and I'm an extraordinary person who does ordinary things. When my son was hospitalized for his illness, I learned a lot of, I guess, tricks and strategies that were very, very helpful for me. And they were also very helpful for my family, for my husband, for all of us involved. And, that was what I had mentioned. I was taking notes on earlier.
Right. So what kind of things? Like give me some examples.
So when my son was in the hospital, what I would do is I would take pictures of him about every 12 hours to monitor his progress, if to see him improve.
Mhm.
Because my husband would ask me, he's like, I don't think he looks better. I don't think he looks better. And I would take out the pictures and I'd be like, all right, here's where we started. Here's where we went. Here's where we are. And he goes, okay. So, and he could see like the color in his cheeks or
Right.
things like that. So it was a great way to have physical proof of saying, no, he is progressing.
Mhm.
Um, I would also use the notepad section on my phone to keep track of all the questions I wanted to ask the doctors. And what I would do is when they would come and do their rounds and I would ask them the questions, I would write the answer underneath the question.
Mhm.
I wouldn't delete it. because later on when you process everything, it's like, wait, what did the doctor say?
Oh yeah, for
So I'd go
sure.
back into my note section and I'd be like, oh no, we're good. This is what they said. And if we have any, we need to look for this, and it'll take this amount of time. It's like, all right, got it.
Right. So do you think that it was a hidden blessing that you got pregnant right away to help you cope with the loss?
I don't know, to be honest. I really don't. I know that, a lot of people believe everything happens for a reason, and it's all part of a great divine timing and planning. Um, I believe that my son was meant to be in my life, and I believe that it if circumstances hadn't happened the way they did, that I wouldn't have him in my life.
Right.
Um, can I say I'm glad that it happened the way it did? I don't know. I don't think I
Right.
can, because it still does focus around the fact that I did lose my daughter right before him.
Right. Yeah, I love that saying, or understand it, I should say. Everything happens for a reason, and divine timing and all that business. But that is like the last thing you want to
Yes.
hear when you are going through
Oh,
anything
yes.
tragic, whether it's the loss of a parent or
Yes.
any type of loss or tragic circumstances. Anybody
Yes.
that says that at the time is just like, shut up.
Yes.
That's
And it's
not
so
what I want to hear.
we talk about that in the pregnancy loss communities so much that it is like nails on a chalkboard for us when people are like, it happened for a reason. Really? Please
Right.
elaborate on that, because I want to know why my baby had to die. Please,
Right.
just elaborate. Well, I'm sure it was a reason. Okay, well then I'd love to hear your reason.
Yeah.
you
So
know,
are there
and
any other things because you never I never want to be that person that says the stupid thing. And I'm sure it is a kind of a reoccurring theme that there's people that you hear it over and over when you're going through something like that. Is there anything else besides everything happens for a reason that a lot of people would say to you and you'd be like, that's not helpful?
they're in a better place. Heaven needed another angel. Anything along those lines, like
A bright light.
yeah, that bright light nonsense is just not helpful.
What
Um,
is helpful? What is a good thing to say to somebody that has
ask
gone
them
through
what
that?
they need.
Okay.
Say, when and the thing I think about is when someone tells you that they've lost a parent, a relative, even a dog. Nobody's like, "Oh, I'm sure it happened for a reason." They say, "I'm so sorry. How can I help you?"
Right.
That's what you say to a person that has lost a child or a pregnancy. "I'm sorry. How can I help you?"
Yeah.
Don't offer this bright light nonsense.
Yeah, because it's terrible.
It is.
There's no, and everybody means well,
Yeah.
no, just people just want to say that one thing that'll make you feel better. And it's like, sorry, I've got to go through it. I have to
Yeah.
feel like crap for a while before I can feel better.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the at least statements of, well, at least it was early. At least you can get pregnant again. Oh, you'll have fun trying for another. Nope. Keep those words out of your mouth and out of your mind when you're talking with a pregnancy loss.
Right. And
Mother.
I literally said that at the beginning of this. I said, well, I guess if there's anything good, it's just that it happened early. I was one of those. It's just I think we just as humans, we want to make other people feel better with words, and sometimes there's just no words.
Yes. And that's why I want to bring a lot of attention to this topic, because, you know, everybody has the right wording and phrasing and support systems in place to help somebody who's lost a parent, an aunt, uncle, sibling, you name it, a job, a dog, whatever. But there's no preparation for how to help someone who's lost a baby or a pregnancy.
Right.
And, they are all devastating in their own right, but we need to bring attention to it, because this is a very, very real situation. Approximately 1 in 4 women will experience pregnancy loss in their childbearing years.
Hmm. Do you feel like you have another book in you? Do you
Oh
feel
yes,
like it's
I'm
something
working on
that
another one.
are you? Good
I
for
am.
you. I was gonna say because that would almost open the floodgates a little bit because then you're like, oh, I should have put that in there. Oh, I
Hmm.
should have said that. Well, that's great though that you're getting it out there because if there is somebody that's going through what you went through,
Hmm.
now they'll have a resource. Because I
Yes.
feel so bad for people that don't have that. I mean, were the doctors or people at the hospital did they have any helpful resources for you?
No, they really didn't.
Wow.
When I lost my daughter, I tried getting into a postpartum group, and I was denied because I didn't have a child. And postpartum was for people who've had a child. Um, Newsflash, no.
Right.
Your body, your brain, your hormones. If you lose a pregnancy, you still go through postpartum.
Mm,
Some women who lose pregnancies later on, they still go through lactation.
right. Yeah, your
Um,
body's gonna do what your body's gonna do.
exactly. This is not like popping a pimple and we're done. This is a long, arduous recovery process.
Mm,
Um, but I was given the only thing I was told was about that online group, the Ending a Wanted Pregnancy, but I didn't get any recommendations for books, other websites, um, other social media groups, none of that. None of it.
yeah. Well, and I think that's good that you tried that group, but I can understand where it would be really depressing if they're
It
all
was.
just telling their um sad stories, and maybe for them it was therapeutic to get their stories out there, but I mean after a while I don't know the time frame. There's no perfect time frame, but I
Right.
just can't imagine just swimming in that murk
Mhm.
for months and months can't make you
Yeah.
feel any better.
And it had its purpose. It did serve its purpose. It was very helpful to get my story out and into a group that understood and could relate perfectly with me. And they did also reference me to the PALS group, the Pregnancy After Loss
Mm,
Support, which I really they were such a godsend.
yeah, that's
They
wonderful.
really were. It was so funny. I would scroll through the comments and posts, and I would see things that were posted, and it was my thoughts on the screen written by somebody else.
Wow,
And I'm
that's
like,
pretty
wait,
cool.
that's I didn't write that. Who got into my brain? Okay, who tricked my brain? Who's listening into me?
Yeah, really. So do
Um,
you feel healed or do you go to therapy now?
I am in therapy, um, and much like therapy, well, actually, I shouldn't say much like therapy, but much like addiction, you're never fully recovered um, from the loss of your pregnancy or child.
Mhm.
Just like when you lose someone extremely close to you, you always miss them in some way. Um, the immediate issues are gone, and now I'm in the, I guess, proactive phase of my recovery and healing where I want to, help others and be a voice and a resource for them.
Right. So I was thinking besides like putting your book out on Amazon or whatever, like can you try and take your book to doctors' offices or, just for people that are going through what you went through? Is that a
I
thing?
am working on it. I am trying to promote it as much as I can on Instagram and through my Facebook site. Um, I do have a couple of people in the medical community that could be resources to help me, but I would love to bring my book to hospitals and the OBGYN department, and just any department within the hospital and say, look, this is really what it's like, and these are things you need to be aware of. I would love to do public speaking and just share my book with the world.
Right, right. Well, and you're doing podcasts, so that
Hmm.
helps get you out there too. Is there any big misconception that you can think of that a lot of people have about your circumstance or about miscarriage that you'd really want to try and resolve, change their minds? Anything that
Well,
you
I
can think
didn't
of?
have a miscarriage. It was
Okay.
termination for medical reasons. We had to make the decision.
Okay. So it's not considered a miscarriage at all then.
It is not. And that is actually such a heartbreaking thing, because when you go into doctors' offices, OBGYN, even primary doctors, and they'll say, you talk to them about your pregnancy history and you say, all right, I've had X number of pregnancies. Okay. It's how many did you terminate and how many, it's either miscarriage, termination, or live birth.
Okay.
So when I say, well, I ended a pregnancy for medical reasons. So you had an abortion? No, I
Okay.
ended it for medical. Well, was it a miscarriage? No. Was it did it live? No. Well, then it's a termination, and it's like,
Yeah, they need a new box.
yeah, they need a new a new line for that one.
Right, right. A
The
new box
biggest
to check.
misconception with termination for medical is, I think, the stigma that, there is we were given the choice, so to speak, but we really weren't given a choice. We were given a ticking time bomb, and we could soften the blow, or we could just let it explode whenever was ready.
Right.
Um, so when people say they had to end a pregnancy or they chose termination for medical, there needs to be a greater understanding that 99% of the time, it isn't a choice.
Right.
It is a path of least destruction. Um, and it is also a path to safety. In some situations, women are at risk of losing their lives.
Right.
So it's okay. How many people are we going to bury? Because if we continue the pregnancy, you'll be burying two bodies, not one.
Mm,
Um, so I guess when you hear that someone chose to end a pregnancy for medical reasons, don't assume that it was easy. Don't assume they wanted it. Ask them to tell you about it. Just like you would anything else that you want to gain information, find out why. Because
right.
chances are it was not easy, and it was not something they wanted to do. They had to.
Right. It's like having a loved one have to decide to take them off life support.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness. I guess I just didn't, obviously, I haven't talked to somebody like you. So I did not even realize that that was a thing. But that is awful. That's
Hmm.
awful that, because it's like you're being forced to explain what you
Yep.
did with your baby and your body. It's
Yeah.
like, well, no, can there just be a category for this, please? So that I can just check that box and
Yeah.
everyone will understand my circumstance. Oh, that's terrible.
And when you tell people, when they say, well, how many children do you have? Well, I have one living child. And that's a big question in the pregnancy loss communities. How do you answer how many children you have?
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, I have one living child.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody wants to ask further, they can. To me, it honors the fact that I've had loss and I have had life, and it's up to them to further the conversation.
Were you spiritual at all before this? Are you now? Did that play a role at all in any of this?
It did greatly. I was brought up Catholic, but I've also always had a spiritual side to me. Um, like when you see a feather or a butterfly or a
Right.
cardinal. So I've always been very spiritual, but I was brought up Catholic. Um, and losing my daughter greatly shook my faith. Greatly shook my faith. Especially because of the fact there were so many people within the Catholic and Christian community that would say, "Oh, it's part of God's plan." I, I would think to myself, well, maybe punching you in the face is part of God's plan too for that comment.
Right.
um, it was weird because a lot of the people in the community would pray for me, but then they would end up unintentionally hurting me by saying things like, "Oh, it's part of God's plan. They're in a
Yeah.
better place."
Right.
It's like, "Oh, being in my arms isn't a good place."
Right. Right. Yeah. And who are you to say where
Right.
my baby should be or
Exactly.
yeah. Ugh, again, I think people mean well. They just
They
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 just need
do.
they don't need I do it too. I'm guilty of it. You just want to say the right thing and there just isn't. There isn't a perfect thing to say ever
Yeah.
in that kind of circumstance. I think just being there with that person and
Well, there are better things to say.
right, right, definitely.
And one of those, for me personally, was if someone would say, "How can I help you?" Acknowledge my loss, say, "I'm sorry for your loss. How can I help you?"
So what is your symbol from your daughter? Is it a feather or is it a
It's a yellow
cardinal?
butterfly.
Oh, beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And I talk about it in my book and
Did you
how it
name her? I mean, you don't have to tell me if that's in the book too,
Yes,
but
we
okay.
did.
Okay.
And
Um well yeah, so go ahead and tell people your book. What's it called? Where can they get it? All that good
so
stuff.
my book is titled Behind My Smile: A Rainbow Baby Story. It is available on Amazon. You can get it in Kindle version or paperback.
Righty. And then where can they find you on socials?
So on Instagram, it is at Grace Peterson RBM. RBM stands for Rainbow Baby Mom.
Okay.
And the same for Facebook, it's Grace Peterson RBM.
I appreciate you being so vulnerable and getting that topic out there. I think it needs to be out there.
Thank
I
you.
did not understand all the differences, and now I do. And so I feel more well informed about
Oh,
where.
that makes me feel so good to hear you say that I was able to inform you. Like,
Oh yeah, because if you don't know, you don't know. And so I'm happy that I've gotten to meet you, and I'm anxious to air this so that people can understand that there are different situations out there, and they're definitely not always a choice.
that's wonderful. That's how we create a ripple of change and a ripple of positivity.
Right. Well, Grace, thank you so much. And I will definitely be in touch soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Bye bye.
Bye.